We're live. Good evening. My name is Bruce Watkins, and I'm a retired superintendent of District 742. I'd like to welcome all of you tonight to the District 742 Legislative Committee Candidate Forum. The purpose of the forum this evening is to give candidates the opportunity to share with the St. Cloud community their views on the importance of E12 education, early childhood through 12th grade education, and how they would support E12 public education in St. Cloud and across the state. It's also a chance to give the public an opportunity to weigh the candidates' answers regarding public education in making their decision who will best represent the St. Cloud area in the legislature. Our forum tonight is being televised live. It's on Spectrum, channel 179, and it will also be available on the district's website under Video on Demand. We certainly want to thank all of our audience members for showing up and being here tonight, our listening audience for tuning in, and our candidates for taking the opportunity to fulfill a civic function by running for an elected office. The very premise of public education is to ensure a grand democracy. We thank our candidates for being here tonight and participating in this process. I will be asking each candidate to give a 1-minute introduction, and we will start there and go right through. After that, we'll start with questions that have been composed by the Legislative Committee for District 742. Now, you're not going to get asked about Supreme Court justices, and you're not going to get asked about tariffs, and you'll be able to tell quickly that our interest is in bringing you here tonight to find out your stances on public education. So they'll be slanted and driven in that area. I also want to thank the school board members and the legislative committee for taking the time to host this event. Later in the evening, there'll be cards circulated in case the audience members want to ask questions. We don't know how much time each of the answers will take, even though we're trying to time them, but promptly at 8:15, you'll be asked for concluding remarks, and the concluding remarks will be limited to 1.5 minutes. So, audience members may submit their questions via cards that have been distributed, and please give them to either Shannon Haas, Bruce Mose, or Bruce Henches. Our timer tonight will be our board chair, Jeff Polis, or not board chair, board vice chair. And it's Jeff Polis seated over here, and he'll have a card that will be held up at 30, red card that's held up when you've used 30 seconds, and a yellow card at 30 seconds, and a red card that says stop. Okay. We'll allow you to complete your sentence, and then for the sake of all other candidates being able to participate, we'll stop at that point. So even though you're going to have a chance to go through and give introductions, I just want to tell our viewing audience and our audience members that our candidates tonight are from Legislative Districts 13A with Lisa Demuth and Jim Reed, 13B, Tim O'Driscoll and Heidi Everett, 14A, Tama Tice, Eric Putnam, and our Senate candidates from Senate District 13, Jeff Howell and Joe Persky. And again, candidates, thank you for being here. Let's start with your own introductions. Heidi?
All right, well, thank you, Bruce. Thank you to District 742 School Board for hosting this event, and thank you to everyone here to listen and participate in the process. My name is Heidi Everett, and this is my first time seeking public office as a volunteer over the last 20-some years. I have actually been on the receiving end and working on behalf of those who are working through the decisions of our elected officials. Most recently, I've served as president of the PTA for Kennedy Community School, where we raise tens of thousands of dollars every year to support academics, activities, and helping students with funding. And I got into this race because the current political process does not reflect the values that I've raised my children by. There's a lack of civility that's stalling progress and stalling a common vision to move this state forward. And so I am seeking the State House for 13B. Education is one of my top priorities in addition to health care. And I look forward to your questions as well as hearing from my colleagues here this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you as well, Heidi, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to visit with all of you and those of you who are at home as well. My name is Tim O'Driscoll, and I have represented District 13B, which consists of the Sartell, Sauk Rapids, and St. Stephen, Holdingford areas, as well as the townships of St. Wendell, LaSac, Brockway, part of Avon Township, and the Holding Township. And I have grown up in this area. I'm very familiar with the priorities of people in this area, and I've enjoyed the opportunity of serving in the legislature. My very first term in the Minnesota House, I was on the Education Committee, and then I've been moved to a couple of other different committees. But later on this evening, when we get a chance to talk about some of the things that are on the agenda for questions, one of the questions says, can you share something unique that you've done or will do for education? I want to talk about a huge accomplishment that I had for education when I was a freshman in the Minnesota House. So looking forward to sharing that information with everyone tonight.
Hi, my name is Eric Putnam. I'm running to represent District 14A in the Minnesota House of Representatives. 14A, for those of you who don't know, it's the south side of St. Cloud, St. Augusta, and Waite Park, and Westwood, that kind of region. I got into politics partially because I'm a teacher. Education is my thing. I've taught second grade. I've taught sixth grade. I've taught at a community technical college for several years. I've taught at the University of Minnesota, the University of Maine. I've taught at St. John's University now for 16 years. I'm a teacher. That's who I am. My family's very much invested in teaching. My wife, Lori, is the principal at Kennedy Community School. In fact, she's here tonight, and we're so both dedicated in education. This is a date for us because of how rarely we get to see each other. But that's a big part of why I'm running for office, is because I believe that as a teacher, as a politician, that we all have tremendous potential and that we all can be better if we just focus our efforts and do the work that it takes.
My name is Lisa Damath. I'm from Cold Spring. I'm married to Nick. We have 4 kids. Public education is very important to us, and I currently have 2 grandsons in public education and one that is too young for it right now. I've served on the Rocori School Board for 11 years. I won my first term as a write-in, and then I went on to run for 2 more terms. I'm in the last year of that right now. Education, like I said, is very important. I value that in what I have learned on the school board and how it affects our communities. Also, with that, I am looking forward to working on workforce sustainability and healthcare. What I've learned is to listen to people, to hear what is of concern to them, and then how can I bring that voice to St. Cloud. Thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you also. Okay, I know I got to press the button now. Okay.
As long as the green light stays on.
All right. Hi, thank you all for being here tonight. Obviously, education is very important to me as well. I'm presently County Commissioner here in Stearns County. Also, I was the mayor of Sartell and also was on the council for 6 years up there in Sartell. I've been a teacher for 26 years in Sartell and a teacher for 37 years. And now I'm running for the legislature. Obviously, education is very important. Schools are not Democrat or Republican. They belong to all of us. And we need to make sure that our legislature is focusing on the people and not on the parties. The Constitution says we the people, not we the party. But down there, it doesn't seem to have it right. They seem like they put on jerseys, Vikings and Packers, draw a line, and go at it. That's not the way we should be doing things. We should be coming together and working together. And I hope to bring that down in the legislature and break down some of that partisanship and build a better Minnesota.
Well, good evening. My name is Jeff Howe. My wife and I we live in Rockville where we raised our 4 children. They're all 4 grown. They're out of the house. They all attended Rocori School District. education is, of course, very important. I think it's what gives us the opportunities to succeed. And we all learn at different ways, and we all learn at different times of your life, because I was not a good high school student. I learned how to learn when I was in the U.S. Navy. So I'm a veteran. I served 38 years in the military. I've served on the school board, or not on the school board, on the city council. And now I've served 6 years as a representative for District 13A. And I look forward to continuing that service now in the Senate, as Michelle Fishbach became our lieutenant governor, as she got sued and basically forced to give up her Senate seat, which allowed me to run for this seat. Look forward to doing it. Thank you.
My name is Jim Reed. I live in Avon. I teach political science at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. I've done that for 30 years. I'm a product of a good public school. I never doubted that I could go as far as my talents and energy took me. In one of my classes this semester, I'm using Robert Putnam's Our Kids. Robert Putnam talks about how in the 1950s, when he grew up in Ohio, there was great social mobility and social opportunity because everyone in that community saw not only their own biological kids, but all the kids in the community as their kids. That, to me, is the ideal of a public education. Putnam also describes how much that has weakened and disappeared over time, that people increasingly don't care about or don't even know about the kids that are not their own kids. That, to me, is what we have to recover. We have to see everyone's kids as being part of our community. We have duties to educate everyone's kids, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Good evening. My name is Tiana Tice. I live on the south side of St. Cloud. Greg and I have been in the St. Cloud for 38 years, which coincides with the amount of time that we've been married. We have 3 sons. We've been business owners of some sort since 1985. Right now, I am on the HHS Reform Committee, Aging and Long-Term Care, which is a subcommittee of that. I am on Government Operations and also Ed Finance. This year, I'm running for my 4th term for 14A. The reason I want to get back soon, because I just really feel the need to continue work with mental health. It reaches every single area that we touch. It truly does. Whether it's law enforcement, schools, and I've tried and did get a hearing this year, which I'm very proud of, for the counselor bill, so that we can get more counselors in our schools. It didn't get included in the bill, but it had a hearing, which was really a great achievement. And also, I really want to go back and look at some of the regulations and such that we put on our businesses.
Thank you very much, and we're going to go right into our questions. And we had Heidi Everett start us out, so we'll go down one this side, and we'll have Tim start, and we'll go right through, and then come back and finish with Heidi this time. And our first question is, what are your education budget priorities for the upcoming budget session? What are your education budget priorities for the upcoming budget session?
That's a great question. In our state's $40+ billion budget, 2/3 of that budget is dedicated to education and dedicated to health and human services, which are both an important role that the state ends up playing. So about 1/3, I guess, or so of the state budget is discretionary on other things such as law enforcement or the DNR or other types of things. I've always been a strong advocate for increasing the per pupil funding unit, or money on the per pupil unit formula. The past couple of years, you've been able to increase that by about 2% each year. Some years it keeps up with inflation, some years it doesn't. I'm very big on putting it on the formula versus dedicating funds so that the school district can use it as they need those funds for different areas. If we can bump that up to 3% or even higher, that'd be great. The appetite with the governor's office and the legislature in the past has been keeping it at about that 2% range.
Please.
I don't know if I have another question about more specifically about the budget formula, but this seems like a good opportunity to talk about things that we would do if we actually did have money in the public schools, which unfortunately we don't, and we haven't since 2003. Those of you who might know that if the budget formula, the basic increase to the general fund had just kept up with inflation, not even done extra stuff, but just kept up with inflation, at this point we'd have an extra over $500 per pupil in our district right now. That's $5 million. Do you know how many teachers that could afford? But the incumbents who are up here did not enable the growth in that fund as they should have. So for me, one of the things that has to be a priority is class sizes. My daughter Eliza up there, would you wave real quick there? She's a freshman at Tech this year. She has 40 kids in her English class. She's sharing a desk with her teacher. If you think that's okay, I don't. We do need more support staff. We need more adults in the buildings to help mentor our kids and grow them into good citizens.
My education budget priorities would be, because of my work on the Rocori School Board, knowing how difficult it is to actually balance, but taking a look at a state level. What I'd like to do is make sure that our per pupil funding is equalized across the state. I feel that in greater Minnesota, in our districts out in this area, that our children are worth no less per pupil than those in our metro areas in other ways. Also taking a look at those mandates that are both on the state and federal level. If we're not funding those mandates, it's an area that I would like us to also take a look at what's being done and then focus how we can improve that to make a difference in each one of our districts.
You know, as I come into the legislature, it's just like when I came into being a commissioner, being a mayor, being a member of the Sartell Council. Always looking for good information, because you need to have that good information before you make those decisions. Looking at the formula, obviously it's important that we continue to increase the formula. The magic number, you know, a couple of percent, maybe that is the place where it has to be, but we can't get behind. And when school districts get behind, kids get behind. And so we got to make sure that those funds are out there. Those other districts that have limited funds, you know, it's very concerning. How do they make up for the deficits that their children might have if the state's not doing their fair share of getting involved with making sure that the funds are available? And also the mandates. We've got to be very careful about the mandates, having them out there, but then expecting the school districts to provide, but not giving the adequate funding. It's just not fair.
Well, you know, if you look at the budget, where it's, right now, the state funds it at about 40% of the general fund budget goes to education. So it's the largest chunk of our general fund budget goes there. So it's quite huge, and I think that says the priority that the state legislature has put on it. But if you notice, there's talk that some of that money gets into special pilot projects and special funding. And I think that it's important, before we do those things, that we make sure that we fund our general obligations to our schools first before we start funding special projects and special ideas. So I think it's important that we make sure we fund our schools on the basic needs first.
So my funding priorities, first of all, I agree with Eric. We need to get back to the funding level that we had before 2003. Public education has been relatively underfunded since then. We need to get back up to that. And connected with that, it is the case that in the district that I'm running in, property taxes have been going up to make up for that funding loss. Those property taxes hit people very hard, especially if they're on fixed income. The degree to which the school districts in District 13A have depended on property taxes has gone way up since 2013. So in that sense, both those two things are connected. We need to get overall state funding back up to what it was, and we need to have a fair treatment of districts of all different types in all different parts of the state, no matter what their property tax base is.
I agree that we do need to add more onto the formula. In the past two bienniums, we've added 2%, which is 4 straight years of 2% on the formula is more than had been done for the last 10 years. We do need to make sure that we do fund that first. When we talk about the other special programs, I think we need to be very selective in what we do choose. I am hoping to get some more action on my counselor bill. I believe that Minnesota is not doing a great job with counselors. We need to get more counselors in and have those social, emotional, and academic folks there. We are truly missing them, and I believe it does make a big difference in what's happening in our schools. But also that we take a look at some of the programs that are coming forward. I'm very happy to be working with the Sine Foundation, which has been having some amazing results. The numbers are just staggering, just in St. Cloud. We're doing a lot better than they are in the Minneapolis area, and it's been just fun to watch that happen. So I really look to some more innovative programs like that.
I'll just put myself out here. I think we need a 10% increase to the base formula. That will put us on par with what 2003 levels were and adjust it for inflation. After that 10% increase, we can go 2 to 4% based on what is happening in the state legislature as well as with taxes. While it is a significant majority of our budget, we are 21st in the nation for how we support our students in school. We can do better. We need to do better. We also need to tackle unfunded mandates. Currently, just on the special education side alone, we have 3 dozen mandates that are unfunded that exceed what the federal requirements are. Are all of those necessary? Maybe, maybe not. We also have other mandates like we have to provide school busing for students whose families choose to put them outside of public schools if they are within the district. There should be compensation for that because it is taking advantage of the school busing system that we have set up and funded for public schools. So there are a variety of areas that we can focus on, but putting that base formula on track with where it should be is first, and that's 10%.
Thank you. We're going to go to our second question, also related to funding. It uses some of the information you've already heard. Funding from the basic education formula has not kept up with inflation since 2003. What % increase in the basic education formula would you support? And we start with Eric Putnam.
Well, you did discuss this a little bit already, but I think some context is very important. First off, sure, we had a 2% increase in the general fund this year, but all the incumbents who were up here were in office when it wasn't that high over the past 10 years. Where were they then? When we think about increases in general formula too this past year, a lot of the incumbents that we have up here actually argued for a 1% increase, and it's the governor who stood up for a 2% increase. And 2% still isn't even inflation. Inflation is a little bit over 2%. I think at the very least we need to commit to a 3% increase, and that's still not a remedy for all the harm that's been done by unfunding education for all these years.
I appreciate the 2% funding that we've had over the last 4 years. That has helped all of our districts without a doubt. Do I think that that basic funding should receive an increase? Yes, I do. Could we push it to 3, 4, maybe even up to 5? I believe that would be a great starting point for us, and that's what I hope that I could work on when we get there, to be able to increase that to benefit all of our districts across the state of Minnesota.
It seems like we're just coming out with our numbers, which ones are going to work best, but it seems like almost a 2% is a bare minimum for what has to get done. But as we've fallen behind, perhaps doubling that, especially since the Minnesota economy is doing so well, and we do have a surplus, that we can maybe, elevate it to perhaps 3, 4, even 5% to catch up. But definitely we do have to make sure that those basic needs are being met. And again, the disparity between the school districts, having to look for individual levies is not the answer. We've got to make sure that the state is funding the programs we need.
Well, thank you, but I'll take exception to what was stated that says all the incumbents have been in here for the last 10 years with the funding shortage. I've been in the legislature for 6 years. 2 of those years I was in the minority. So it really didn't make any difference how I voted because the DFL was in control of that budget and could make it whatever it was. But the last 4 years with the Republicans in control, we gave a 2% increase all 4 of those years. I think that's very important to recognize. And I do, if we can afford and the budget can support it, there's no reason why we shouldn't support maybe 3%, 4%, as much as we can, because education is important. But we got to remember, there's a limited amount of dollars out there, and as much as education is important, we know that Health and Human Services sucks a lot of air out of the room also. So there's a lot of competing interest for those dollars. So it's not just so easy to just throw money at it. So, thank you.
So I believe that in 2003, statewide funds paid about 72% of public education costs. Now it's down to 67%. So whatever level of increase in the formula will bring us from 67 up to 72%. That's what I favor. That drop from 72 to 67, that's where the increases in local property taxes come from. That's what hits people in fixed incomes. That's what creates inequality between districts.
I believe we should start at the 2% and go up from there. And I'm really hoping, and there was discussion in the past couple of years about going to 3, but I think we could even try and push it to 5. But again, as Representative Howe said, we have to look at, how much money do we really have and how much can we push it. Thank you.
I do agree with Representative Howe that there are competing interests for funding at the state level, but our Constitution specifically states that the success or failure of this republic will be determined on the intelligence of our community, and that intelligence is gained starting from pre-K on up, and how we support our community from cradle to career, through career to whatever the next phase is for all of us. And so we need to make that commitment, and I do believe that commitment is 10%. And I actually do agree with Lisa as well that we need equitable funding across all of our school districts. The success and opportunities for all of our kids should not be dependent on their zip code. All kids in Minnesota should have the same chance at success, because we will all succeed when our children succeed.
It's kind of interesting to listen to the different folks here tonight and talking about things. There are competing interests. One of the things that I know many of the candidates are on this panel this evening are also talking about is our infrastructure, our roads and bridges. We're also constitutionally mandated to work on those items as well. So we can't put one of our constitutional mandates ahead of another constitutional mandate. Health and Human Services, there's discussion as well about how are we going to be able to deliver health care, how are we going to be doing that. Some are talking about different programs that are going to cost major public investments. And I just did some quick math. If we did a 10% increase in the formula right now, that would about wipe out all of the state surplus in 1 year, and we'd be in another biennial issue coming up on that shortfall. Also, my very first year in the legislature in 2011, 2012, we had a $6 billion with a B deficit. And the thing that we made as priority was education. The Republican legislature moved forward with the governor, eventually got a deal done, so that education was held as harmless as we possibly could.
Thank you. Our third question also deals with funding, and this will be for Lisa Demuth to start us out, and it says, in the coming year, Minnesota schools will be forced to spend $700 million across the state of funds meant for regular classroom instruction on mandated special ed programs. St. Cloud, as an individual district, will have between an $11 million and a $14 million cross-subsidy in this area, and the cross-subsidy referring to spending general fund dollars to cover special ed expenses. Will you support and vote for significantly increasing special ed funding to reduce or eliminate the cross-subsidy? The notes from the legislative committee say this is a yes or no question, but please explain your answer, yes or no. And we'll start with Lisa.
Thank you. I would support, you used the word significantly. I don't know how to define that exactly, but I would support possibly increasing that funding. I know the funding has increased on the state level, but we have federal mandates that aren't being funded. If the federal portion would come in and move their point up as far as their subsidy, move that up instead of down, we would be in a much better place. So I think that's another area. I know this is a state issue here that we're talking about tonight, but I believe we need to put some pressure on the federal to get that funded.
Absolutely. We need to increase that funding. If you've had a child with special needs, or if you have a family member with special needs, you know how important it is to have those needs met. Those basic needs, can't be overemphasized, especially at the early levels. And the earlier the intervention, the better off we are. In my experience with special education, adaptive physical education, and now even working with WCOSA, there's no question about it. The more revenue or the more resources we put into it, the better the community grows, the better the community benefits.
Well, the answer is yes or no. It's a yes, but I guess I would agree with Lisa that I think that what we need to do is force and lobby the federal government to pay their 40% share. Because if they paid their 40% share, that $735 million projected shortfall would be $450 million. Much more manageable for a state than $735 million that it's currently at. So if the federal government would pony up their share of the bill and cover their mandates, we might be able to cover ours. But we should take a look at, because of I know there's a lot of paperwork. I hear about the paperwork in special education is a nightmare, and we need to streamline that and get that down. We've got people that that's all they do is special education paperwork. So we do need to restructure some of that stuff and get it down to a reasonable level.
Well, at least in this case, I agree 100% with what Lisa and Jeff just said, that we have to lobby the federal government. They have fallen down on the job. That's a long-term project. Failing that, yes, we do need to increase it at the state level. Going door to door, I often have conversations with parents that talk about the particular needs of their child, and often it says something like this: my child is doing well, but just well enough to not qualify for funds for support. And so my child is very bright, dyslexic, not quite dyslexic enough to get help. And so that kind of, that leaves many parents feeling frustrated and feeling like the system is not serving them. We do have to do something from then. I wish the federal government should step up, but if they don't, in the meantime, we have to do so.
I would vote yes. We do need to do something. In 2015, there was a new formula that was implemented, and it's kind of confusing and costly for districts. I think we need to take another look at that and see if we can't reform that a little bit to make it a lot easier to use. But also, I have supported House File 4272, which was looking at doing some work and extra monies for the special education cross subsidy, and I think it was like $20 million that would start in 2019. So I really look forward to continuing that work and pushing that along a little bit further.
Everyone's wondering what I'm going to say to this after saying I'd like to see a 10% increase to the base formula. I do believe that we need to do something to support the mandates that are requested of our school districts for special ed. I do think that if we increase the base formula by 10%, that would go a long way to helping with the budget offsets at the school district level. As I said before, we have almost 36 mandates for special education that are unfunded that exceed what the federal requirements are. We should be looking at those to find out what is duplicative and taking time in the process with staff help, paperwork, that type of thing, and find out if there are cost savings within that. My approach would be to start with the base formula, try to simplify and make a much more efficient process, and then look at where we are in a year or two on that funding for special ed.
I want to go back and I want to reiterate what we said. There's a split. Many of the mandates that we're asked to fund at the state level come from federal mandates. And it's always great to have the mandates when the feds have the money to back it up. But when the money goes away and the mandate is still there, it's like rising waters. It starts at the school district level, then it moves to the state level, and then back to the federal level as the waters rise as to who has to deal with these issues. So we're kind of in the middle ground right now. We don't have the money from the federal government coming in. So I support going back with the feds to get them to pony up. And what Minnesota said, as Mr. Reed said, as a part of his comments, some folks have children who are not quite able to qualify for needs, maybe need a little extra help. That's what Minnesota did by putting the other mandates in place. And if we can't fund our mandates because the Fed's not holding up their end of it, makes it difficult for us to be able to feed both parts of this when one of the partners isn't doing their job.
I'm kind of glad to go last on this one because everyone basically agreed already for the most part, and I don't have tremendous more to add. But I would say that while pursuing the funding from the federal government is important and absolutely needs to be pursued, we still need to deal with what we've got going on right now. And because of that, yes, I would absolutely support some kind of intervention in the cross-subsidy for that reason. But I actually think this also speaks to a deeper issue that our school district is struggling with. I don't think that people in St. Paul necessarily understand the particularities of District 742. I think a lot of our funding, when they talk about what's happening in 742, they think that we're a rural school district. We're not. And the cross-subsidy, ELL, EBD funding, these things are all issues that aren't being addressed because people don't seem to understand that we're a small city. And 742 is big and complicated. So I think that's a root, deep cultural problem in understanding what's going on in 742. But when it comes to specifically the cross-subsidy, absolutely, I think we should do what we can do.
Thank you. For our first several questions, we've been working our way this way. Tama Tice, I'm going to start with you with this next question. We'll work our way this way for a while just so that everybody doesn't have to follow the same person all the time. And our next question is, what strategies and investments do you support to ensure all children entering kindergarten are prepared to learn?
Okay, you goofed me up a little bit on this one. So we're not doing the next question, that's what strategies we're talking about, early education. Okay. We did a lot with scholarships. We did a lot with looking at some of the programs that are available to our students or our early education folks. I'd like to continue doing some of those. It was wonderful to see the programs unfold. I know that it's not necessarily early education, but we're looking at programs like Rock and Read, programs such like that. I think children have a wonderful time with that. I've been talking to a couple of our child care providers, and I was really amazed and quite honored to see quite a few of the parent-aware rating posters in their businesses. I think we do a really good job of making sure that we get those tools out there for them.
There you go. One of the things that's impressed me in talking with educators going door to door is how much depends on spotting a problem or a challenge at the early childhood stage, that if it's addressed at the early childhood stage, it won't become, is less likely to become a huge problem later on. If not addressed, that's where you have major problems later in a student's life. So for whatever strategies, investments to ensure all children in kindergarten are prepared to learn, I would say let's see what those obstacles are. Let's see what those challenges. Sometimes they're mental health challenges. Sometimes they're family-related stresses, and so that we know what that child is going through when he or she gets to kindergarten, and that puts a lot of pressure on early childhood. But I think that's where the attention is now and where it should be.
Well, I think there's been great success with the childhood scholarships. I think we need to continue to fund those. I think because it basically targets those that otherwise couldn't afford to send their children to early childhood and pre-K. So I think it's very important to target those folks that otherwise couldn't afford it and get those folks, because we know that if we start them early, they usually have great success. So I think targeting those families that otherwise couldn't afford to do it, I think that's the important thing. So if there's an opportunity to expand those scholarships for those folks, I think that's what we should do.
I'm going to start with a different slant on this question. And I think everybody here at the dais here is very much concerned about building a better Minnesota. And when we build a better Minnesota, families thrive and families will prosper. When families prosper, we have better health care, we have affordable housing, we have good nutrition, we've got crime-free communities, and that's where children get a good start. So in general, we got to make sure that families are supported throughout the state. The early childhood programs definitely need to be funded, no question about that. That helps level the playing field for those folks that come for a disadvantage. So we need to make sure that those fundings are there available for those kids.
I would support the funding for the school readiness and the early learning scholarships. I think the early learning, the data shows how important that is for our students, but the other piece that I really appreciate is how it teaches those families that have maybe not had a great experience in school or just are unsure of what they can do with their littlest ones. And as I agree with Joe in the fact that as we have stronger families, that does actually matter. And I love the idea that we can come in as schools and help our families to realize that this is an exciting time for them with their newest little school kids, and then that will build that anticipation as they go forward. And so I would completely agree with funding that.
You know, by happy luck, just today, I went to visit a child care center in Westwood. Love and Learn. I hadn't planned to do it in anticipation this evening. It just happened out that way. And I remember talking to people who work there as I served meatballs to 5-year-olds and hearing a little bit about the struggles that they have as a business. And part of their struggle was the lack of communication between early childhood centers, public schools, and in-home care. So one of the things I think is a specific policy that needs to be adopted to really improve the quality of early childhood education is facilitating communication between early childhood education that happens in the public schools, that which happens in centers, and that which happens in homes. Each of those spaces is valued. Each of those spaces can do wonderful things for our kids, but currently they live disjointedly and in tension. But each of those different spaces can do something particular for our kids. And in particular, when it comes to early childhood education, we have a definite struggle retaining teachers in those spaces. And I think retaining those teachers could be helped through greater coordination and communication between these different spaces as well.
I want to underscore that if you go to school ready to learn and you get the services that you need because you might come from a situation where you've been not been able to be involved in things that your family might be able to provide for you because of wealth or because of personal economic conditions, putting everybody on the same playing field is absolutely important. And one of the things that we did a few years ago in the legislature was we did put the early scholarship money out there. And we said we want to be able to give parents the choice of where they want to send their kids to be able to be educated, to get those skills. That what was important to the family, what was important to them, that they felt who they spend a lot of time with those children, what do they need? So we opened up the opportunities for those individuals, whether it be in a private sector, a public school, a faith-based. We said, you are the parents. You know what's best for your kids. You decide. We'll make the money available. And it's a little bit early yet to see what the results on that are going to be, but I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised that we are going to see the curve being bended as a result of that.
Like my colleagues here, I support the scholarship funding for families to be able to access school readiness programs as well as funding school readiness programs. I would even support making sure that we keep the revenue streams for ECFE as well as pre-K separate and both of them funded, because early childhood family education meets a different need to strengthen families and helping families understand how to interact with their child, how to play, how to have meaningful learning and reading and role-playing together and things of that nature. So we need to extend beyond pre-K and include ECFE. I also would like to see us incentivize and celebrate partnerships that allow us to meet people where they are. I know when I've got 3 kids in their 20s, when they were in preschool, I worked at a family-friendly workplace, and so I was often picking up people's kids and bringing them into school because they couldn't get away from work to get the kids to school. So either are we able to provide transportation to access those resources or go to those folks at their daycare or their homes, much like the pack rat bus that brings the library to the kids in the summer.
Thank you. We're going to go from the general on the pre-K to the specific. Some of you have mentioned programs that will expire at the end of this school year. So funding for voluntary pre-K and School Readiness Plus will expire at the end of the 2018-2019 school year. Will you support and vote for continued funding of these programs, at least at their current level? And again, this tends to be kind of a yes or no, please explain, and we go to Jim Reed.
Yes, I don't think the need's going to go away in 2 years. I want to add a couple of other things, however. One of that is that transportation challenges, especially in greater Minnesota, having the programs is part of it, but also families being able to get their kids there is really essential, and in many parts of greater Minnesota, that's a significant challenge. And second, I agree with what Eric said earlier on, that we need to bring the at-home child care centers into the picture, that this needs to be a communication between those and the school-based child care centers. There's different, families have different needs. Both of those types of programs should be there. There should be communication with them in terms of what are the needs of children. They should not be seen as separate or simply in competition with each other.
Yes, I think those schools that are currently in the program, those programs should either be extended or made permanent. But I also think that we need to give them more local control to spend that money to where they need it. They might need to spend it on some transportation needs. They might be, but right now, there's a lot of strings attached to those dollars. So I think that we should extend or make them permanent if we have the money, and but loosen up the strings so they can use it as they see fit, because they know their local needs much, much better than we do down in St. Paul.
It's almost the same question that we had before. Do we want these children to be ready? And if we don't invest the money, they won't be ready if they don't have the programming that they need. So, yes, well, let's go ahead. Let's move those programs forward. Let's keep them going, because we want to level the playing field so that all children can learn. And especially those that come in at a deficit, let's make that deficit up and give them a better chance.
I would also agree with continuing the funding for these programs. As Jeff said, though, I would appreciate and would go along with fewer mandates, giving that local control, because each district is very unique in the needs in that area, and I think we need to trust our districts to be able to handle what is best for their students.
Yeah, I would absolutely support this. As everyone said in answer to the last question, but I didn't get a chance to say, clearly, when you can diagnose issues early with kids, they're more likely to have better outcomes as they get older. So we do need to actually invest the funds in early childhood education. You help a kid when they're 4, that's a lot cheaper than putting them in prison when they're 20.
My thoughts are maybe. and the reason I'm giving you a maybe, which is right between yes and no, is the fact that the Department of Education will be compiling data for us so we can see how successful the pre-K program has been and the districts that are currently using that. And if we're seeing success, we should continue to feed that success, or we should tweak the system or the process to be able to continue to be on a successful track. To just say, let's renew it because it's already in existence, really doesn't cure the problem and help us stay in focus with what we need to have as our ultimate outcomes.
So I answered yes on the last question, so I'm just going to take the liberty to go off on a different track here. I want to elaborate on the celebration and incentivizing community partnerships. I know District 742 has an amazing organization out here called LEAF, Local Education Activities Foundation, that I served on for several years, and they have this amazing program that was a partnership of 5 local businesses, and I'm not going to name them because I'm afraid I'll miss one and then I'll feel terrible, but they put together this program where it is a mobile library that hits all of the elementary schools and other key neighborhoods in the district to help prevent some of that backslide during the summer, so students have access to free books that they can go and check out. That type of partnership and that type of innovative approach can take the education system out to people where they need it, when they need it, outside of the typical school day. That's the type of thinking and partnerships that we need to be rewarding.
I say yes as well, and I hope that we can extend and continue to make it a priority that we keep these programs going. I also feel that sometimes providers don't feel like they're valued or taken as seriously as they feel they should be, and yes, we do need to make a better communication, what do I want to say, a better communication plan between all of the folks involved. I also think that I do a lot of times in committee say that St. Cloud is not a typical district, does not act like a typical district. It would be just astonishing to a lot of folks to come here and see what we have. We did have a special pilot program that was going to help with a summertime English learning for some of the students that are not speaking English. However, that didn't make it through. It was vetoed, and I hope to continue that work as well, that we can have some programs in the summer so that some of these kids can get up to speed with English.
Thank you. Our next question deals with the fact that new federal tax laws allow individuals to deduct tuition to private schools. Do you support vouchers, expanded tax credits, or other taxpayer subsidies for non-public schools that would take dollars from the state's general fund? Yes or no, and please explain, and we start with Jeff Howe this time.
Well, I would have to say that yes, I do support those vouchers, but I think that comes with an explanation, because I think what happens right now, I think many of the people, would say, well, we need to send that voucher over to whatever school the parent thinks that their student would be more successful at. Well, I say that I agree with that. I'm going to agree with that with a caveat, because what happens normally is those private schools or those parochial schools don't get the strings attached and the requirements and the mandates that the public schools do. So for me, if that private school or parochial school is going to take that voucher, along with that comes all the mandates that we currently put on that public school. So they're going to have to provide this special education. They're going to have to provide the English language learners. And all of that is going to come with that if they take that voucher. And I think that would level the playing field, and those parents could still put their student where they feel they would be the most successful.
I have a similar answer to Jeff as well, and that is with the mandates. If we're going to be putting public money into private schools, then they must cooperate with what our agenda is as far as getting the quality of education in the state of Minnesota. However, if not, then I have a difficult time saying that we're just going to have a blank check for those folks that want to pay tuition at a private school, and that's what they're going to get. Those vouchers have got to make sure that they're actually going to be funded in programs that again, account for the things we want to be happening in the state of Minnesota schools.
I do support the vouchers as long as those mandates can be taken a look at for the non-public schools, that they are asked to comply with the same requirements. One of the things that changed in 2018 on a federal level, though, is that you can now use up to $10,000 from a 529 for elementary, middle, or high school. And I think that's an advantage that families, outside of what we normally do, another way that families could possibly fund that if they would choose a non-public education for their students.
Well, I appreciate the nuance that Jeff, Joe, and Lisa have just shared. I'm a no on this one. An emphatic no on this one. Not just because I'm a product of public schools, but because I'm kind of a nerd. I like to research things and study things. I might have my own personal values, and I operate in the context of those values, but if I'm making decisions for other people, I need to be able to make a better argument and justify it. And if you look at the research on this issue, in 2016 there were several studies published, and when you take a kid and you give him a voucher and bus him from a public school to a private school, he does less well than if he stayed in a well-funded public school. The research simply does not justify this idea of people going to private schools for better education when they're taken out of their own communities. It doesn't work that way. The other idea that this is about choice also I don't buy. There are plenty of choices and lots of differentiated learning that occurs in 742 right now, and there would be even more if it was adequately funded. Instead of, as Tamara and Jim Knobloch did in last session, take $125 million and give them to subsidies for people to take their kids to private schools. I think that's a bad idea.
I have to tell you, I'm a little miffed by that last response from Mr. Putman, and I'll tell you why. The state of Minnesota, in its general education fund, has education. We're talking about it for the voucher system and stuff. But both Mr. Reed and Mr. Putman work for private colleges, St. John's and St. Ben's, which in our higher education budget, we put an awful lot of money into student grants on that. And so my concern is if it's good enough for college students, why couldn't it be good enough for elementary students to be able to have that same choice? I support the system. We may want to readdress vouchers as far as mandates go. But I'm very concerned about those who are currently in their employment getting that type of benefit for their students, but not willing to let that happen at a younger level.
Well, I'm a professor of communications and journalism at a public school. I do not support vouchers. Our constitutional mandate is to create an amazing, thriving learning environment in our public school system, and that is what we should be funding so that all kids, regardless of their zip code or family status, have an excellent education. There are other opportunities to fund it, the Section 529, as well as the federal tax credits. We don't need to be funding that out of state of Minnesota dollars.
Yes, I do support it for several different reasons. One is that not every child learns the same way. And as a parent, I should be able to say, okay, this isn't working for my son. I would like to look for something else. My youngest son was a hard kid to raise, and I wish we did have more options. I had gone with my niece, who was just moving from Costa Rica and working in a Spanish immersion school, or looking for a Spanish immersion school. I went with her to, I think at the convention center in St. Paul. The auditorium was filled with choices. We don't have that here, and we never had that here. And I think parents should have that opportunity to find the different possibilities for their kids. They just don't learn the same. And also, we have a lot of small communities where the only school in the community is a Catholic school. If we don't allow for vouchers, what happens to them? Do we close those schools? Do those communities no longer have a school there to support? We need to look at those options as well, because they serve us very well in getting kids ready for the rest of the world.
So I'm also a no on the vouchers. To me, I want to go back to something I said in my introduction, which is that the mission of the public school is that we have a responsibility to everybody's kids, not only our own kids. And only the public schools have that responsibility. If we were to do vouchers so that there was enough money for every school, for every child and for every private school that had to take those children, we might be in a different situation. I've never seen any proposal for vouchers to be funded at that kind of a level. In practice, it is the public schools that have this constitutional responsibility to every child. I don't see the privates and the public in competition with each other in the sense that in many children who go to parochial schools then feed into the public in Recorey or District 742. Many people who go to public schools, as I do, then teach at or go to a private university. So I don't see these as a conflict with each other, but the public schools has the obligation that these are all of our kids. Everybody in the community are our kids.
We've hit on an issue here that the legislative committee from 742 knew would garner certain responses and beg for certain explanations. So there's a follow-up to this, and I'd urge you to, if you needed to take notes because it's got a multi-part to it. And it says, and some of you have addressed the mandates, it says, should non-publics that receive taxpayer funding be required to comply with state mandates? Many of you have answered that, but then it also goes on in the next question to ask, be held accountable for how the taxpayers' dollars were spent, and then finally, be open to all students. So it was a three-parter. Some of you have spoken to the mandate, and just briefly repeat your stance there, but then should they be accountable for how taxpayers' dollars are being spent and open to all students? And we start with Joe Persky.
Very much so. Yeah, they need to be accountable for those that funding and be accountable for those mandates. Otherwise, the state funds should not come that way. Also, looking at the vouchers that we talked about earlier, I guess I'm a little bit concerned. Like I said, we do want to make sure that they have those opportunities again if they hold to those mandates. But again, it can't be just a blank check. We got to make sure that there are limits as far as how much that can be. But as far as it goes, yeah, let's hold them accountable, and they have to be.
And one last part, just so people don't forget it, or I don't, and it was a question about should they then be open to all students?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, as I said earlier, I do believe that those mandates need to be complied with. I agree with that. I also agree that they need to be held accountable for the taxpayer dollars and absolutely open to all students.
Again, I oppose the vouchers in principle, but with those caveats, they actually seem much more rational and reasonable, but still problematic, and just especially in terms of implementation. How would we do it?
As I mentioned, I would support the vouchers. I do want to look at the accountability issue. Open to all students, absolutely. Accountable for money, how it's spent, absolutely. That's what I always look for on spending the taxpayers' money on behalf of the taxpayer, that we're getting the best return for our investment.
There we go. I don't support vouchers. However, if schools get vouchers, yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, I support vouchers. Yes, I do think they need to be accountable. And yes, I think they should be open to all. In fact, I was approached a couple years ago about carrying a bill that actually said that there was a Catholic school and a public school very close to each other. One, and the Catholic school had a program that the public school student wanted to go to, and we were actually looking at doing that, actually having that public school student going to the Catholic school to get what they were looking for in their education. So I think it should be open to all.
I oppose vouchers, as I said earlier. If there were vouchers, I think this question gets at what would have to be there for them to be even minimally just. It would have to include special education students. They would have to be held accountable for taxpayer dollars, and they would have to be spent and open to all students. My nightmare scenario for vouchers is when will you set up a class system where there's one group of students that have their own family resources plus the vouchers, and they have very well-funded schools, and then you have another set that have only the vouchers and nothing besides that, and they go to really bad schools. Setting up that kind of class system is the wrong kind. If we're going to do vouchers, that's the nightmare scenario to avoid. I think that this question here gets at some of the things that would be needed to be in place to avoid that. So I think it would be somewhat an improvement on a policy which I still oppose.
I think any organization that takes public money should be audited. And they should have an audit performed by a CPA of their choice, as far as, if you know my legislation. Whether it's a county, a city, or a school district, or a private school, if they take our taxpayer dollars, our hard-earned money, they should be given an audit, and of course, it should be open to all students.
Thank you. We're going to reverse the order one more time, and although Heidi started with an intro, we'll ask you to start this question this time. And the next question is, give us one unique idea you have regarding how you would improve the way the Minnesota legislature fulfills its constitutional duty to provide a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state.
Obviously, people do not like to pay more in taxes, so when I say I'd like to see a 10% increase to the base formula, people probably bristle a little bit unless you're an educator and you want funding for your classroom. I do think that there is a lot of opportunity in incentivizing business partnerships like we do. I worked at the technical and community college for 4 years, and as we developed programs and sought out funding for equipment and scholarships and program development, we had incredible working relationships with the legislature as well as local businesses. When Alexandria High School built their new high school, many of their rooms and equipment purchases were funded through partnerships with local businesses. Part of securing a viable, thriving state is ensuring that all stakeholders are working together and have skin in the game. And certainly our local businesses will benefit from us having an educated, well-prepared workforce, and that starts before kindergarten. So seeking out those business partnerships.
One of the areas that I was involved in when I came in as a freshman was the school trust lands. And very quickly, in order for Minnesota to become a state, we had to set aside one section of land in every township for the benefit of schools. Think of the Ingalls girls on Little House on the Prairie. That's where they were educated. They would lease or do activities on that property that would generate money for the schools. Those lands are still in existence. Unfortunately, those lands have been mismanaged by the Department of Natural Resources by making those open to the public but not compensating school children in the state of Minnesota for those uses of lands. They do charge the expenses against that, but they do not charge or share revenues with students. This past year, the Minnesota legislature, we put $56 million from what we thought was a bad thing that the legislature is doing by not holding the DNR accountable for taking some of those monies and giving those to school. $56 million is the additional amount of money that we put into the omnibus bill that will come right to the bottom line for a school district using that formula. I've been called out by many educational organizations when I work in that area, and will continue to work in that area until those injustices are taken care of for the school kids in the state of Minnesota.
The question has to do with what the legislature can do to help this particular concern. I think there's some stuff we can do locally in 742, but in general, at the legislative level, clearly the first step is to start funding education adequately and honestly. But I think a bigger concern that would be nice to see would be a renewed focus on citizenship education. Something that the legislature can actually do is create an imperative to start thinking about citizenship education as a core component of our public education. Our public schools are one of the only places where you have to sit next to someone who doesn't look like you and learn to get along. I'd like to see the state legislature work hard to incentivize those kinds of activities in our public schools. We've got a group of young people here tonight who are involved in a kind of citizenship internship, teenagers who meet with you every week to talk about public issues. There's 10 of them up there right now. There's no reason why that sort of thing can't be happening in the public schools right now. If I'm elected, when I'm elected, I will start a Congress in the Schools program to initiate greater investment in public life and politics so that schools start producing citizens.
My unique idea isn't unheard of. It's not necessarily new, but it would be taking that basic formula, equalizing it across the state like I talked about, and then increasing it. I do agree with Heidi, the partnership that we can have with businesses in our area. 742 is a rich area with businesses. My district, 13A, also has a lot of manufacturers in there, and I believe that we can do that partnership that'll increase the ability of our students to know what's in their backyard, what they can actually take advantage of, and then learn whether they take that back outside or if they stay within our area.
I would like to see an improvement in the student teaching and development of teachers in their early stages. Some type of a mentorship program, and even going back to the way we start students off. When they leave the college or university, we put them into student teaching, but yet we go ahead and we charge them for those credits. It seems a kind of an insult in a way that we're charging them to actually be doing the teaching and doing a benefit to the school districts. In many other professions, we don't do that. We actually give them some type of internship, and we actually give them some type of a stipend or pay for while they're on the job. But these students are paid nothing and yet expected to do a job. So that's one thing I'd like to see happen, is a little more fostering of the student-teacher program, and then a continuation as they develop their careers in mentorship.
Well, I'm not going to say that this is a unique idea, but I think that the education formula right now and the education the funding process for our education system is so convoluted that no one really understands how it's done. So I would say we should put a task force together to actually made up of parents, school board members, and teachers, and maybe a few legislators, to actually sit down and actually, if you were to design a funding mechanism that for education today, and start now, don't look at what we did in the past, what would it look like? Let's build it from the ground up and build something that works. Because right now, everyone's got their little niche that they're looking out for, and there's so many little special pockets of money that nobody understands how it's actually done. We're just putting money in different little pockets. Let's start from scratch with a group of concerned people that actually have a dog in the fight and make something that works.
Well, I can't claim this is a unique idea because I stole this from somebody I was talking to in my door knocking. We were talking about the challenges for young teachers entering the profession and how difficult it is financially, and how often it is difficult to recruit teachers, young teachers. And the person admitted that simply boosting the pay scale for all those teachers, which we'd love to do, might not be financially possible for many school districts as much as would be needed. But if we could help eliminate the loan burdens, people coming out of their educational training rack up large loan burdens. This is true of everybody going to college right now, but it's especially a burden for people going to teaching because it's relatively less paid. So if we could immediately address those loan burdens so that somebody coming in as a young teacher, promising young teacher, doesn't have that additional mountain to climb, I think that would be something very good to do.
The formula that works for the metro area doesn't necessarily work for St. Cloud, and it doesn't work for any other regional district. So I think we should look at really how do the different districts act, and maybe we can come up with a better formula for that. I also think that the partnerships are just a wonderful idea. I recently saw a piece on the Worcester Tech High School in which the day is spent somewhat on academics, but then they're working on all kinds of vocational programs, whether it be veterinary, car mechanics, culinary, you name it. Some of them were working in mechanics and stuff. It's just an amazing possibility, and I think it's something we really can do. To look at that, they said that 98% of the students graduate, 86% go on to higher education. I think those are the things that we strive to do, and I think getting our businesses involved with it is a great way to do it.
Thank you. We're going to take one of the questions from the audience, and I'm going to ask you to pare this one down a little bit. It's a simple question. It says, can you please relate or discuss your engagement with various groups in our community, including youth, elders, people of color, working class people? So the question is asking you to tell us a little bit about your engagement with these groups. And we'll start with Tim O'Driscoll.
Thank you. I'm a very actively involved person in the central Minnesota area and have been for a long time. And all the groups that I can come in contact with and have contact with, I attempt to do that and accept invitations to work with other groups and to work with people and their needs. Specific groups, I won't get into the details, but I do have and learn a lot from visiting with people about how I do my job as a legislator, not just education specific, but the needs of where people are at.
I want to try to avoid a list, but I can't. So, I was until recently, I was the chair of the board of directors at Promise Neighborhood. I've been currently on the board at LEAF. I'm the vice chair of a nonprofit that specializes in multicultural counseling currently. So I'm involved in a lot of nonprofit work, but I think what I'm more proud of is my work to involve my professional community in our community and get people from students from St. John's and St. Ben's doing work in the community at an increased rate, especially when it comes to populations of color. Those would be the big spots, I think, in terms of community engagement. But I have to also expand on that and say my community involvement in the school district itself. I have volunteered to write curriculum for the public schools for a year. I actually donate my spring break to South Junior High, where I teach English for a week. I'm in the schools and I'm in the community.
My involvement in our area here is in my school board involvement, but before that I was a volunteer in my kids' classrooms all the way from kindergarten through 8th grade. At the high school level, they didn't want me so much until it came to NHS. But I was involved in kids in that area, still with my grandsons. And then also I work with an organization out of Minneapolis called Bridging the Gap. It empowers women on their faith journey in leadership, financial experience, and just whatever they are facing in family and in business also. We do a single moms retreat in the Alexandria area that also draws from the entire state. Our feeling is if we can empower women, especially in this case, to have stronger families, we're going to have stronger communities. Outside of that, I'm also involved with the American Cancer Society on their volunteer leadership, and I feel that I can reach across lines, whether it's to do with health, women's issues, family issues, or faith issues. Thank you.
Of course, my involvement with coaching, working in the schools with various programs that we have, a church group, being an Eagle Scout, but then more recently my work here with Place of Hope, also Habitat for Humanity, WCOSA, the Human Trafficking Board. All those have given me opportunities to take a look at different folks that are in the community with special needs and try to work the best we can to meet those considerable special needs they have.
Well, in my real job as a building official and I contract currently with the city of Wade Park, I get to work with just every walk of life that wants to get into and test their skills in the entrepreneurial environment. Every time, I tell you what, I've worked with the Somali community, I've worked with the Hmong community, I've worked with a ton of different folks that want to come in. They've got an idea, they want to remodel a space, they bring in their plans. Normally we have to kind of work through that. But, so I've got in the business community all walks of life that I work with. But in my past, I'll just tell you the little story. When I deployed my first time with 250 young men and women to the sandbox in Iraq, I was co-located. I had 200 soldiers basically from Minnesota and 50 soldiers from the 1569th Harlem Hellfighters out of Harlem, New York. There is a lesson in diversity you can't get in any school anywhere. Thank you.
So it's my mission, both as a teacher and as a candidate, especially to encourage young men and young women to vote and take the political system seriously. They tend to be very idealistic, but they often don't connect their idealism with being politically engaged. So that's something I do every single day. I encourage college students to vote. I know that some people don't like college students voting in their community. They do have voting rights. And they should exercise them. I want to talk to you about one particular episode. A couple weeks ago, I was invited in by a group at North Junior High called the Future Problem Solvers Team at North Junior High. And these kids were so impressive. There was a Somali kid, there were Latinos, it was a very good mix, and all of them really committed, and they worked with them and showed them how to access a bill from the congressional website. They wanted to write a bill to fix the immigration system, so I helped them look up and find the text of bills, and I think they're already working on fixing the immigration system. Thank you.
I have a hard time saying no, so while it's hard not to make a list, I kind of did. Greg and I always felt like our community is our issue. We need to be involved, and so we've worked with the Big Brothers Big Sister Boys and Girls Club, Jagad Leadership Program. We just had a graduation, absolutely phenomenal program, and I just love Eunice and Ryan. I'm on the Central Minnesota Mental Health Board. I'm a past board member for Quiet Oaks. I was past president of Birthline. My husband's a hot air balloon pilot. We worked for Freedom Flight, which was making the MIA-POW issue awareness for that. I worked at the St.Cloud Technical and Community College with the Sales and Management Program. I'm a past president of the Central Minnesota Builders Association. I've always helped with the youth at our church. I helped in the schools until my son said, "Go away, Mom," which was probably about 4th or 5th grade. And also, we've been chamber members for over 20 years. So we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of folks and get to know a lot of people from that.
My laundry list predominantly focuses on education and workforce development as well as workers' rights. On the education front, as I said earlier, I was president of Kennedy PTA, where for the last 4 years we've raised tens of thousands of dollars to support the educational program there. I've served on the Local Education Activities Foundation, LEAF, raising funding for District 742. I've been an English language tutor for students ages 5 to 89 from South Junior High to St. Cloud State University. On the workforce development front, I served on the Chamber Workforce Development Committee, served 8 years as a litigation chair representing 1,200 former employees who lost their retirements when our company folded, and I served on the Brian Kleinfelter Memorial Foundation advocating for family-friendly workplace initiatives.
Thank you very much. We're going to need to go off the air in about 10 minutes, so I'm going to ask our timekeeper that we adjust our concluding statements to 1 minute. So we'll start right away with Eric Putnam.
One thing, unfortunately, we hadn't had a chance to talk about yet today is the presence of homeless kids in our district. 3% of our kids in our district are homeless. That's only the ones that we count. And I think about that. And I think about what schools can do for those kids, and those schools are struggling to do things for those kids now. I wasn't very good at school. I didn't like school very much. I only went to college basically to run track. A lot of us struggle in schools, which is unfortunate because what schools are fundamentally at their core are opportunities for reinvention, for social mobility, for changing your circumstances, from being something other than you were yesterday, something better tomorrow. And it's about time that we had someone in the legislature who actually stood up for those kids and stood up for the potential of our community. And with your support, I will be that person.
Education, our staff, in our buildings are the first line of defense when it comes to our students. As parents and as family members and friends, we can only do so much, but there are times when our kids are facing things that we don't know about, but those working with our students every day are the first ones to know. I feel that education is very important. How can we surround that? How can we come together as a community and build that? Legislatively, that comes with mandates, possibly, with direction, and then with funding, and I think that we need to be creative in the ways that we can approach it. We also need to partner with our community, with our parents, with our staff, with our administrators, and find out what is working across the state in our schools, what do we need to change, and where are those creative ideas. I thank you for the time for being here tonight.
I grew up in Sauk Rapids, was an Eagle Scout there, then went on to Apollo the year it opened, and went through 4 years of school there, went on to St. John's. After that, I taught up in Onamia, went over and taught with the Department of Defense for 7 years, on the Avon School here in the area, and then later on 26 years in Sartell, and then just finished retiring 2 years ago. I've taught a lot of kids. I've had a lot of experience working with kids. My focus has always been on people and on issues and doing what's right. Going down to the legislature, as I looked at some of these questions, they were a little bit challenging because I didn't know the background. But I do know people, I do know kids, and I do know what's right for them. Together we got to work down there at the legislature. We got to put those partisan politics aside, and we got to come up with solutions that we can, let's say, do what's best for Minnesota. Together we can do that. The partisan politics has got to stop.
Well, I think that's one thing we can all agree on, that education is important. Because education gives you the opportunity. Now, I wasn't a very good student. In fact, I think I surprised a lot of people by getting a high school diploma. But where I learned to learn was when I was challenged in the Navy. And that's where I learned how to learn. And I think that's one thing we miss in a lot of our schools, is we don't examine how everyone gets an opportunity to learn and how we teach kids to learn. We shouldn't be teaching them exactly what they need to know. We just need to teach them how to learn and spark the interest and the imagination in these kids, and let them run, let them go. Because I think we stifle these kids. We don't give our children an opportunity to excel, because we put them into a little box and we tell them this is what you got to learn and this is what you got to recite and this is what you need to know. I don't think that's right. Let's just spark the imagination and let them go. That's what we need to change our educational system to.
When I go door to door, I try to give a brief version of what I stand for. So I'll say, I'm a strong supporter of education. This is our promise that every kid will have a fair chance regardless of whether they come from a rich family, poor family, or in between, regardless of their family background. And the person usually sort of nods yes, as though, yes, that goes without saying. That doesn't go without saying. That's a real demand. We don't live in a world that really is fair. Our schools are part of our promise. There are a lot of other things that the schools can't address or have little control over, but a big part of what the schools are there for is to try to address some of the unfairnesses in our society, where some people really do have great advantages over others. And so when people nod when I say yes, that the purpose of public schools is to give every kid a fair chance, they're actually agreeing to something very important and very demanding, and something that we should back up in practice.
I think what we don't do is take advantage of the kids' enthusiasm and joy and love of life. We kind of think it just has to fit in a box, and I just really would hope that we could open that creativity and let it run. I want to continue the work that I've been doing. I want to continue to find ways that are innovative, that work for the kids. I have been doing a lot of work with Area Learning Center, and not a lot of people know it, and now they will, that I went to Area Learning Center for a while. Those kids are very special to me, and I worked hard to get the recovery funding, or the funding for the recovery school there, because I see the potential in these kids, and yes, they are having a hard time, but I believe in them, and I want them to know it. So as we go further as I go further into education, I want kids to know that, yes, they are worth it, and I'm behind them, and I want to find every way possible to help them have the best life they can.
I grew up in a poor household that was filled with abuse and alcoholism and drugs, and there are so many ways that my life could have gone in a different direction, but I am so grateful for Mr. Gollier and Mrs. Hall at Sandburg Middle School, I'm going to cry even to this day, and Mr. Walter and Ms. Lytle at Anoka Senior High School, go Tornadoes, because they pulled me aside and they said, Heidi, you can do better. And I wouldn't have even dreamed that I would be a college professor. I was just trying to get through. And as Lisa said, these folks, the teachers, the staff, the people who are with our kiddos every single day, they are the first line of defense of keeping our kids on the right track and inspiring them to do better and be their best self in this world. As a state legislator, I will do everything I can to collaborate, partner, and pass legislation that fully funds our education system.
I want to start by saying thank you for having the opportunity to be here this evening and discuss the education matters as they relate to school district, the St. Cloud area schools. 13B has 5 different school districts in them, and the largest 2 are Sartell and Sauk Rapids, followed by Holdingford, Avon, and Albany, and a small portion of District 13B is in the St. Cloud School District. I want to just offer a side note. I'm a little disappointed tonight, and maybe it just didn't work out in the planning, but there's a part of District 15B that represents the St. Cloud School District as well, who weren't here tonight to be able to be a part of this. And I think that the folks in St. Cloud would have benefited by hearing from those legislative candidates as well. We're delivering right now, from my opinion, a rotary dial telephone system in the age of an iPhone. We have to unshackle the education process, free up the money and the mandates. When I was in college and was being trained to be in teaching, we were taught about the system in Minnesota called PER, P-E-R, Plan, Evaluate, and Review. And it was for independent school districts. We need to put independent back in our school districts to let those choices be made by the parents and teachers with their school officials. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, candidates. On behalf of District 742, and in particular its Legislative Committee, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. We hope this evening gave our community a chance to learn more about our candidates in order to make important decisions in November. Please be sure to vote. Candidates, thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah. Good to see you. Thanks. Yep.
Thanks for being here.
Long table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes.